Today, we're diving into the mind of a thinker who really stands at a crossroads in history. This is a man who wrestled with faith, with reason, and with the very nature of reality itself. And his answers would go on to shape Western civilization for well over 1,000 years. So let's get into the philosophy of St. Augustine. All right, so here's our game plan. To really get Augustine, we're going to start with the man himself and his pretty surprising journey to faith. Then we'll tackle three of his absolute biggest ideas: how we find truth, the crazy riddle of time, and that age-old problem of evil. And then we'll wrap it all up by looking at why he still matters so much today.
Okay, so who exactly was the man before he became the saint? Because seriously, if you looked at his early life, you would never, ever predict he'd become one of the most important figures in all of Christian philosophy. His story is just a radical transformation.
Yeah, this is the image most of us have in our heads, right? Augustine the bishop, this huge pillar of the church. But to really understand his philosophy, we have to look past the robes. We need to see the restless, always questioning mind that took a very long and winding road to get here. So get this. He was born a Roman citizen in North Africa, in what's now Algeria, and his whole education was classical and pagan. For years, he was a man of the world, exploring all these different Greek philosophies, admiring thinkers like Cicero. It wasn't until he was 32, after this long, intense internal struggle, that he finally converted to Christianity, and that moment, well, it would change the course of Western thought forever. And this background is absolutely crucial. He came from a world that was just buzzing with competing ideas. So when he finally did embrace Christianity, it wasn't a rejection of all his philosophical training. Not at all. It was this powerful synthesis. He fused Greek reason with Christian faith in a way that nobody had ever really done before. And that unique background led him to a question that every thinker has to face eventually. How do we actually know anything for certain? I mean, how do our finite little minds grasp these huge, timeless truths, like the idea of justice or even basic math? And this is where you can just see his genius for synthesis at work. He loved Plato's idea that truth is eternal, but being a Christian, he couldn't get on board with the whole remembering it from a past life thing. So he brilliantly adapted it. He said, instead of remembering truth, we perceive it through a kind of divine illumination. So for Augustine, the ultimate source of truth isn't out there in the world, and it's not buried in our past memories. It's inside us. He believed that by turning our minds inward, we can be taught by an interior master, God, who literally lights up our understanding. The analogy he used is perfect. Think of the sun. You don't stare directly at the sun to see things. That would just blind you. But it's the sun's light that allows you to see everything else. For Augustine, God works the same way for our minds. His divine light illuminates our intellect, letting us recognize the eternal truths that are all around us. Now, this whole idea of an internal mental world leads us directly to another huge puzzle that captivated Augustine: the nature of time itself. It's something we all experience every single day, yet it's still one of philosophy's greatest mysteries. And Augustine just perfectly captured the central paradox of time with a simple but incredibly profound observation that still totally resonates today. This is the heart of the problem, right? We live and breathe time. We feel it constantly flowing. But the moment we try to actually stop and define what it is, it becomes completely elusive. It just slips through our fingers. So Augustine's first brilliant move was to just reframe the entire problem. You know how people would ask, what was God doing before creation? Augustine argued that that question itself is meaningless. Since time is a part of the created universe, it didn't exist before the universe. God stands outside of time in an eternal present, so there simply was no before. And here is his groundbreaking solution. The past is gone, right? And the future isn't here yet. So how do they exist? Augustine's answer is radical. They don't exist out there. Time is a property of the mind. As you can see here, the past is simply the present memory of what happened. The future is just the present expectation of what's to come. For Augustine, time is ultimately a psychological experience, a stretching of the soul. All right, now we turn to what is maybe the most difficult question in all of theology, a problem that Augustine's answer would define for centuries. If God is all good and all-powerful, why is there evil in the world? Augustine's core insight is that evil isn't a thing. It's not some substance that God created. Instead, evil is a lack of good, a corruption of what's meant to be. It has no existence on its own, just like darkness is simply the absence of light. This decaying tree isn't a separate creation called decay. It's just a living tree that's been deprived of its health and vitality.
To explain this a bit more, he broke evil down into two types. First, there's what we can call physical evil. This is just the natural corruption and decay in the world. Things aging, breaking down. For Augustine, since God is the only perfect and unchanging being, anything he creates has to be less than perfect. And that means all of creation is naturally subject to this kind of decay. It's not a moral failing, it's just a consequence of not being God.
But what about moral evil? Things like cruelty, greed, injustice. Well, Augustine says, that's on us. Its origin isn't in nature, but in human free will. God gave us the profound gift of choice, but that gift necessarily includes the freedom to choose wrongly. This means God is not the author of evil. We are. Evil enters the world when our own bad will chooses to mess up the proper order of things, when we choose a lesser good, like money or power, and place it above the ultimate good, which for Augustine is always God. So, what's the common thread tying all these ideas together? What is Augustine's ultimate legacy? Well, it all comes down to the relationship he built between faith and reason. This phrase, which he borrowed from the prophet Isaiah, really became the motto of his entire intellectual life. For Augustine, faith and reason are not enemies. Faith isn't a blind leap in the dark. Instead, he saw faith as the thing that provides the light. It's the necessary starting point that orients our reason, allowing it to actually move toward true understanding. And that leaves us with a final thought. Whether we realize it or not, we are all still living in the world that Augustine helped build. From our modern focus on the inner self, to our debates on free will, to our search for meaning in a complex world, his voice continues to echo. Nearly 1,600 years later, we are all still wrestling with Augustine's questions.